Thanks, Simon. That's a question we get asked an awful lot at the university. So textbook answer really straight out of, we know that one. So yeah, I'm Richard. I'm the Assistant Director of Infrastructure at the University of York, but I do a lot on technology now as well, so not just infrastructure. I head up cybersecurity at the university and then some other things as well. Background in cyber infrastructure, software development, and I was a computer scientist originally. I was at university when defeating Go was like the dream, and we were just about to beat chess. So that's very exciting to see the progress that Google's made in that. And I've been hands-on with Google over the last 12 years. I've been an admin, I've been the person doing security incidents, and now I'm the person, as the service owner for the whole piece. So I was asked to talk today on why Google. Why is the University of York sticking with Google? In some ways, we're a bit of an outlier in the UK. There aren't many universities using the platform, but I'm hoping to share today why I think it's the right choice for us and why we're committed to it as a platform. So, University of York, established in 1963, so relatively new in the terms of UK. Other universities have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, so relatively new. Started out with 230 students back in 1963, and we've now got nearly 23,000 students. So, quite a lot of growth over that period. Research intensive, Russell Group, lots of research, and we moved to Google in 2011. We moved from some Unix mail servers and something called Sun Calendar, which is probably the worst product that was ever invented for calendaring. And so it was a real step change for us. We didn't move from an Exchange environment or anything like that. We moved straight from an old school Unix and Sun straight into the modern world of Google. We took our staff from having tiny inboxes that they had to manage to effectively unlimited ones, proper search capability. And at the time, that Google philosophy of archive, don't delete. And obviously that's created some interesting data retention issues, but by and large sort of a huge win for us in terms of taking people from that. So we don't have academic staff worrying by and large what they've got. They can just get on with their work, get on with their job, and know they can find stuff when they need it. So if we move to the next slide. One of the key things for me about Google, and one of the things I keep shouting about, is security. The filtering built into the platform is really, really good. And I don't say that lightly. We get very, very little phishing that comes through to users' mailboxes compared to what you get with perhaps the other competitor out of the box is not very good in comparison. So we see far, far less phishing than our other universities. And we don't have to pay for an add-on either. We're not putting our mail through, some other security product. We're using what's built into Google, and it works really effectively for us. It's not. Are we using Security Sandbox? I presume so.
I thought I'd just throw it in there, Richard. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I thought it was really interesting that you said about the filtering piece. So we can talk about that later. But yeah,
let's do that. It's very, very effective though. That's something. And we tried to do a phishing test a few years ago, famously with a third-party supplier, and we really struggled to get that to work. They sent the test email. After that, it was blocked. They set up a new domain, and Google had already recognised that was when they registered the domain and the certificate, it was already blocked by the time we got to test it. So trying to phish all of our users was a bit of a challenge, but that's a really, really positive thing. We don't get a lot through, which is good. I really like that it's not integrated into our Windows domain and our Windows infrastructure. We have seen far too many attacks where somebody gets onto a laptop, gets domain admin, and then takes down the entire infrastructure. And while integration is a good thing, if you get your integration too tightly integrated, we do see those issues. And what we've seen in other places is that when they do get ransomware in a big way, they tend to spin up a Google domain and use that temporarily. Well, we're ahead of the game, right? We've already got our Google domain. It's what we use every day. So hopefully we never get ransomware at the University of York, but we have to assume that it might happen one day. But because of that separation, it doesn't immediately spread. It doesn't immediately, just because you've got domain admin, you don't have admin on the Google domain. There's no connection. If you want to get admin on the Google domain, you need your hardware token, use separate credentials and that kind of thing. So it does protect us from that. Very straightforward, otherwise privilege escalation. There's one admin panel. That's really key for me as well. I'll talk about the resource that we need to run Google later. Spoiler, not a lot. But having everything in one place, not having to go to a separate panel for your mail and then a separate panel for a different product and then find some logs over here on another thing. You get one admin panel where you can very quickly do any kind of investigation that you want to do. And over the last 10 years, that capability has grown and grown. It used to be, oh, I want to find out who deleted a group. Oh, there isn't a log for that. These days, there's nothing that there isn't a log for. And with the extra features that we got with Workspace Plus in terms of doing proper investigations as well, you really can query everything, find out what happened whenever you need to. And the other point I just wanted to make was it's really easy to deploy security features as well. So University of York, we were one of the first, I think the second or third, to deploy DMARC in a block mode, which is obviously essential these days. But you want to set up DKIM signing on Google Domain, it's a couple of clicks. It's not a huge problem, and it means particularly if you're a smaller institution or a smaller site, you can get the same security as the bigger institutions just by clicking a couple of boxes and pressing go. And we should all have the same level of security, whether we're small or big. It shouldn't be you have to pay to get security. So I do really like that with the Google platform as well. If we can move on to the next slide. Another thing I like about Google is that it is built for collaboration, and that was again a step change for us. The whole doc sheet slides thing of it's online. There's a single copy of the document that everybody collaborates on. Moving from an environment where everybody emailed their Word documents about, and then there were multiple copies and nobody knew which was the master copy. It was a massive faff. And now you've got that single copy. If somebody does send you a Word document, you can just drop it into Docs, convert it, and then say, well, I'm not playing that game. Here's now the single copy that we can all collaborate on. And it means you can work online. You don't end up with data sitting everywhere because you send me an attachment, I download it, I put it on my laptop, I send it to someone else. There's one copy online. I can see the access control. I can revoke the access if it's inappropriate at that point. So that's a really nice thing. And it was built like that from the beginning, so it never feels awkward. Because it was, again, web native from the beginning, I think it's really easy. It's really quick to use. Like I find if you give a user Google Docs, I don't need to train them in how to use it. It's intuitive. It's immediately obvious how to use it. And you were talking about the smart canvas earlier. I think that's great because I find people just using it. I don't have to send out a load of training about how to use smart canvas. Yes, I can drop hints and tips, and you might not have noticed this feature and that kind of thing, but they find it and they use it. And because it's web native, it's totally cross-platform, which for us is really important. We have a lot of Linux users. We don't want our Linux users to feel like second or third class citizens. You've got a tablet, you've got a Chromebook, you've got a Mac. It doesn't matter what you're using to access the platform. You get the same experience. There isn't a Windows version and a Mac version, like perhaps with the Office suite, and you get all these weird differences. Unified experience, really good for a support perspective as well. And finally, on the collaboration side, just one last point, is the sharing model that's really good with Google as well. I think it's not too complicated. You can go in, you can share your document with who you want, particularly with shared drives. You can set up a shared drive with a set of permissions that you know what they are. And then anything you drop in there has those permissions. It's much easier to audit and make sure you're doing the right thing. Whereas if you get into really complicated, you can do all the complicated stuff, but that simple model makes it much easier to not make mistakes. Cool. If we can move on. So another thing I like about Google is it's really easy to live with. We don't have any dedicated Google people at the University of York. We didn't have any in 2011, and you know what? We never got around to recruiting anybody to do solely Google because we didn't need it. Which is, it's an interesting way of doing things. We've got extensive use of self-service. So from the beginning, we embraced let's just let people use the tools. We turn groups on. Anyone can create a group. Students can create a group. Staff can create a group. What's the problem? They have to have dash group on the end, so it differentiates them. They can't create something that looks too official, but they can create any groups they want. They can use those for permissions. They can use those for mailing lists. They don't have to come to us and say, we want a mailing list for something or a social activity or a project or anything. They can just do that. Same with shared drives. And they can create a shared drive for a project. They don't have to come to our help desk. If we've got 5 or 6 people on our help desk, we can't afford them to be sitting there creating things. Google just lets everybody do it. I think I'm going to do the questions at the end because there's some questions going through, but we'll pick that up. So in terms of no dedicated team, I think our security team looks after the security in Google, and I used to be that team, and then it grew into a team, and I do other things. It was just something you could do. You could pick it up. It was easy to pick up. The tools don't require you to learn a lot about how it works. If you're used to doing investigations in a security context, you can pick up the Google tools. Simple web form. I want to search for this email address or this IP address, or I want to know who deleted this thing. You don't need to learn to use it. You just use it when you need it, and it gives you the right answer straight away. Our sysadmins run them sort of mail, used to run the mail config and that kind of thing. They look after those bits in Google. It's very little. It just works most of the time. And what that means is instead of employing people to run Google, we can have people who are supporting the use of Google, building solutions in Google. So we have a digital skills team. They're not solely Google, but they do a lot of stuff building solutions in the platform. And they can do that instead of managing the mail server. Instead of having someone to manage the mail servers, they can do that bit, which is great. APIs, I think that's been talked a lot about today. But they are really good, comprehensive set of APIs, and once you've got GAM as well, and you can use that tool to use all those APIs, the combination is really effective. So we use GAM for loads, but an example, very occasionally a malicious email gets through. Our security team can just delete it from everyone's inbox, done, before anyone's even read it, just with a simple GAM command. That kind of power needs to be used responsibly, but that kind of power can really help you with those those point solutions. We have an ongoing problem with the fact that Google isn't particularly accessible in China, but it was really easy for us to set up a little page where the students could go and say, I want to forward my email somewhere else, just using the API. So setting up mail forwarding via an API, really straightforward. Or a more complex example, one of the things that we have is when a student's perhaps not well or had problems with their course, they have what are known as exceptional circumstances. It used to be you filled in a paper form, you took it to your reception, they typed it in, then you wanted to upload your evidence, so you brought your document from your doctor and that kind of thing. And it was a very intensive process. We replaced that with a process. It was initially a Google form, and you fill in the Google form, it goes into a folder, it creates a template. That template is shared by the people who review those claims in your department. They all work on one master document, so there's no mailing about. The decision is recorded in the same place and then communicated back to the student. Later on, we needed to do things that we couldn't quite do with Google Forms, but it was really easy. We just put a Ruby front end on that. So we've got our front end and web team to design a little front end on that. So now students can upload their evidence, can do other things with that platform. But still Google at the back end. And we'd like to do everything in Google, but when you can't, it's really easy to extend that by putting other software in front of it and then dropping documents into Google. And then the users don't need to know anything about this extra system. So the staff just collaborate on a Google Doc in the same way as they did before. So I really like that. And finally, on that easy to run, I think the licensing model is really straightforward, which if anyone's ever tried to understand Microsoft licensing, you'll really appreciate the simplicity of Google. You've got free licenses and you've got a paid upgrade if you want the extra storage and the extra features, which you probably do. But those are the two options, and it doesn't. There's the products in between, but for us, there's two options basically, and it's not like licensing on a per product basis or a per feature basis, or if we've got visitors, we don't have to give them a paid account. They can use the suite. That's absolutely fine. If they need a paid license, we just add one on, and that's it for the licensing model. So there's a huge win in that. We have a full-time person doing Microsoft licensing in effect, so you don't need that with Google, which is great. And the last slide. So the final thing for us is I don't like the whole monoculture thing, and there's something about the university. We want to have the best of what's available out there, the best technologies. We have a best of breed strategy when it comes to platforms. That we don't have a single ERP that does student records, finance, HR, all that. Ideally, we'll have the best systems, and we'll integrate those together. And Google's great for that. It can sit in the middle of your tech stack, and you can choose to use what's there. So actually, using Google Meet today, I think Google Meet will be absolutely sufficient for us. Now, at the moment, we have Zoom. We've licensed Zoom. We've licensed Slack. We add those on top. But if we didn't have those, I think the Google gives you the core platform, and there's no problem extending it. We've got Zoom. If I create a calendar invite, I just say I want a Zoom meeting instead of a Google Meet. Google doesn't get in the way of you adding on additional technology should you choose to do that. But you might not even need to do that. And big savings if you can work within what you've got. And actually, the difference between Google Meet and Zoom now, I'm struggling to see it. So that's perhaps something we can do in the future. And obviously, the other thing is exposing our students to a wide variety of tech. I don't want our students to go out of the university only having used Microsoft Word and go into the workplace and, what's Salesforce? I don't know how to use that. I've only ever used Word. We try and make sure that our students are doing that. It depends on their course, obviously. But if you do a course in music, you'll typically use Windows and Mac and a bunch of different technology. If you're a computer scientist, we make sure you've used Linux, you've used Windows, you've used different things. And so we like to, as much as possible, we don't see it as a bad thing that students use a variety of technology. There's a lot of pressure to give the students a really simple experience, and they only have to use one thing, and we take them down these narrow tunnels. But then they go in the workplace, and the world's not like that. So it is kind of part of our strategy that we want to expose our students to a wide variety of technology, and I think Google really helps with that. And there's a lot there to use. And obviously, we just turn it on, and students can use it, teachers can use it, lecturers can use it as part of their courses. And depending on the course, they'll be using sort of Google Cloud components or other cloud components. They'll be using the AI features. Increasingly, we need to be teaching AI skills, so having those in the platform as well. It's all part of what we're trying to do. So that's my little rundown on why I think Google's a great choice for us. And obviously happy to take any questions at this point.
Richard, I just want to say thank you so much. And I mean, there's probably about 5 Richard Fuller quotes I can see on Google for Education t-shirts. It was a really interesting presentation. I just want to say, since you were just talking about it, I totally agree with your approach to, it's not just about one technology. It's just not realistic, and certainly we don't position ourselves that way. Coexistence is just so important. And I'll just share really quickly. I was visiting a primary school a couple of weeks ago. I sat down and had the opportunity to kind of sit down with this 8-year-old who was on a device, and she probably had about 15 tabs open. I asked her, I was like, "Do you find that difficult? Do you find that tricky?" Just kind of looked at me bemused, as if I was asking a very stupid question. She was like, "No, I'll show you. It's really easy." So I think it's absolutely a reality that students need the best of breed, definitely, across, depending on what they're doing. And I think those examples are so good, right? If they're in music, they're most likely going to be accessing those other technologies out there that are known for pursuing that. So really, really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing, and thanks for putting that together. Does anyone have any questions? There's probably some in the chat, but does anyone want to just go off mute and ask a question while Richard's on? Yeah, go in.
Yeah, Richard, thanks very much for that presentation. And I know that a lot of the universities that we're working with in Estonia, across the Baltics, will listen to the sort of video recording and probably have lots of questions for you. But one that I wanted to know, it's about the trust that you give to the students and the staff. In terms of the applications, the extended applications or the extensions, how do you manage those with the balance of safe and secure? So can you explain how you manage that sort of ability for them to be free to do what they need to do, but still be safe and secure?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest here and admit this has been a weak spot for us. So historically, we have let people install whatever extensions they want, and we've kind of got to the point where that's not going to work. And we had a bit of an incident last week where somebody installed an extension and it shared the address book with a third party, who then used that to email all of our people. So we are going to have to start to take a little bit more control over what's used. It's the really difficult one. So I think we've got staff, and I think for staff, we want to get in a position where we enable all of the extensions for all of the platforms that we approve of, because we don't want that friction between platforms that we've approved. So if you want to install, making this up now, but a Slack extension for Google, or you want to install a Salesforce extension for Google, that's fine. Those are our approved platforms. That's where we need to get to with our staff. Students, it's a really interesting one. If you look at what things people have installed, everybody has integrated it with, deliver food to my house type services. Like, 5,000-6,000 people have installed Uber Eats or, other Just Eat or whatever other services are available. What do we do about that? Academics historically have treated their university account as their account. So a lot of them don't even have personal accounts. This is changing, but, in that research university, it certainly used to be the case that once you became an academic, that was your identity and you live in that identity. And so if I say, right, your UKC UK address, you're not allowed to use Just Eat from that anymore, that's going to actually cause quite a lot of fuss. So we've got to work out what we're actually going to do in terms of this. I think the inevitable is that we are going to have to say work accounts off work. I think the inevitable is we're just going to have to help academics through that transition. It's mostly the ones that have been around for a while. So that's what we're going to have to work on. and we're going to have to move to a model where we do have an approval process. I want a relatively lightweight approval process, but I want to link it to the services that we've already approved. So if you want to link it, and I think where Google can help as well with that is as we start to look at the permissions that things need. I want to be able to enable extensions that don't have access to our data, for example. Because I don't care about those. That's great. If you've got something that doesn't actually need the data, it's just using it because you want to use it to validate your identity with a third party, I can be relatively relaxed about that. Where something wants access to drive data or email or that kind of thing, then we are going to have a much more strict approval process. But that's an ongoing journey for us.
Yeah, thanks for that, Richard.
Yeah, thank you again, Richard, and thanks Ian for the question.